Hey everyone, and welcome back. So I wanted to make this video for two reasons. First of all, I wanted to document something from my own record. But second, I wanted to share something with all of you, a particular part of my life that has been with me now for over 23 years, a sort of quest that I've been on that thus far I have not been successful at, a goal that has thus far eluded me, we'll say. And today I received some news in my email that is now going to keep this quest going, we'll say. So to give you some context on what I'm talking about, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to June 16th, 2017. On that date, I received a very similar email, and I posted a very lengthy blog post over my blog called "To Be an Explorer." Now, this is one of my most visited entries, and I think what I'm going to do is simply read right from this post because I think it will completely fill you in as to what this particular quest is and why it's such an important part of my life now. So here goes. I'm going to read right from it. There are those among us who know from a very young age what it is they want to do with their life, what their passion is, and what they want to be when they grow up. These people would know it with such a fierceness that I've always been incapable of truly understanding. I've so often found myself envious of those like this, those that just know where their heart lies. For me, my life has always been about a mix of positive experiences, always seeming to move on from one thing to another, liking many things, but never truly finding that one thing. As a young child, I fell in love with the sciences and have always gravitated towards them. I wanted to be an entomologist when I was in grade school, and I even kept mounted insect specimens that I would proudly display to my horrified friends. Later on in high school, I thought I wanted to be a chemical engineer until I realized just how much I disliked working in a chemistry lab. I found a lot of curiosity within myself towards both the earth sciences and the cosmological sciences, thinking maybe one day I'd go to college to major either in something like astronomy or geology of some kind, but ultimately decided somewhere along the line that something more career-oriented was more appropriate. So in college, I chose computer engineering. After years of working in that field, I began to gravitate back towards the earth sciences, though, and decided to apply for graduate school to study the geosciences. What I didn't realize at the time, though, was that what really drew me to all the geosciences was the thought of exploring and doing field work. That thought, more than any other, is what stirred the fire within me. It wasn't until multiple deployments to Antarctica and many adventures to odd places around the world that I finally realized what it is that my heart is drawn to: exploring. I think back to all those days as a young child studying maps in my living room, and I am an explorer through and through, and nothing feeds my soul greater than seeking out new places. Just thinking back to my trip to Nunavut or my bushwhacking hike to the North American Pole of Inaccessibility gets that sparkle in my eyes a twinkling. These thoughts have been weighing heavy on my mind this past week. Today it was that I finally got official rejection letter from NASA informing me that I was not selected for the astronaut candidate program, despite being a qualified candidate. This is the fourth time I've received such a letter. You see, in all my years of trying to find my path, one thing has remained constant. I've always applied to the astronaut candidate program calls put out by NASA. The letter read in part, "Dear John, thank you for applying to the astronaut candidate program. NASA received a record-breaking number of applicants this year, over 18,000 for this round of astronaut candidate selections. This extremely large number of applicants made the selection process very difficult. Last week, NASA selected 12 individuals from the thousands of aspiring astronauts with the potential to make a contribution to the nation's space program. Sincerely, NASA." So I got that letter telling me I was not selected, and it was very crushing because of the history I've had with trying to make it into this program. So let me continue from my post. I knew this letter was coming as I was not selected for the final interview, and NASA had already announced their selection class, but it is still always a bit hard to see in print. While I've only come to truly and fully understand recently that exploration has been my implicit passion for my entire life, I now know that it has in fact been my lifelong dream to explore beyond the surface of this planet since my youngest days that I can remember. Since submitting my first application as an eager undergraduate student, I have made every effort to better myself and make myself a stronger candidate for the program in the eyes of NASA, in hopes that I might make the initial cut for an interview at the very least. I focused on areas that I knew would benefit not only myself, but my ability to be a valuable asset to the program. When I first applied, I was a mere college student. I had nothing really to tout about myself other than my youth and my good grades throughout high school. I talked about my SAT scores, and as well as my Honor Society and National Merit Finalist recognitions. I talked about my acceptance into top schools and now my subsequent full academic scholarship to a top-notch science and engineering school. I talked about my first year on the Dean's High Honor List and my love of both astronomy and engineering. But as expected, I did not receive an interview with NASA. For my second application years later, I was now a college graduate. I talked about my experience throughout college and proudly stamped my application with my Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Engineering. During my college years, I spent 2 full summers working internships at NASA, working on computer code used to test ceramics for a Mars mission. I felt like I'd contributed in some small way to the greater good of humankind and the NASA missions and mission statements. I knew my chances were slim, but still I applied hopeful. As expected again, I did not receive an interview. Fast forward several more years. I had now been working in an IT environment for a while, having built entire server farms and parts of the network infrastructure for a large hospital. On the side, I began taking classes again at a local community college. I spent 2 full years taking flying lessons, earning my private pilot's license. I even went so far as to complete all of the instrument and commercial training as well. I had over 150 hours of pilot in command time and was licensed to fly. I knew that having a pilot's license was a huge boost to any NASA application. A few years later, I quit my job and decided it was time for some life experience. I thru-hiked the entire Appalachian Trail from end to end and was accepted to go back to graduate school to study geoscience. I had proved to myself that I could handle adversity, hardship, and subject myself to grueling physical testing. When the next round of astronaut candidate program applications were called, I had just finished my master's degree and spent 2 full field seasons in Antarctica. I was excited that for the first time, I might actually be qualified to apply to be an astronaut. In earnest, I was educated, I could fly, I had life experience, and mostly I had a passion for exploration and working in remote and difficult environments. After months of waiting, I finally got the letter thanking me for my application, but declining to interview me. I could have been deflated, but instead I took it as a challenge to better myself even more. Fast forward to 2016, I had now spent 7 full seasons in Antarctica, had become a rather active endurance athlete, admittedly amateur, and most importantly, finished my doctoral program. Now I was a real doctor in a science that would be of interest to future astronaut classes for possible missions to Mars. People want to study the geology, and in my case, the polar ice caps of Mars. While in graduate school, I was even accepted to participate in a Mars simulation in the Canadian Arctic. But sadly, never went as the program was canceled just before I could go. After graduate school, I began working in a federal lab, establishing myself as a general schedule federal employee, coincidentally of the same grade an astronaut comes in at. I had passed all of my federal background checks and was already serving as a civil servant and passed my secret clearances. I strived to participate in as many outreach activities as I could, going to several classrooms of eager middle schoolers, talking all things climate science. I'd even had a few of my papers published in peer-reviewed science journals. I really thought that this time I would actually get the call to at least interview. I knew my age would also be a factor, however, as a 38-year-old applicant is less than ideal. I also knew that this might be my last chance at realistically applying. I'm not sure how attractive a 42 or 43-year-old applicant would be a few years from now. A few weeks after applying, I saw that over 18,000 applicants had applied, and I knew my odds would be minuscule. I began hearing of many of my friends and acquaintances actually getting to the interview stage, and I was genuinely excited for them. But as the months went by, I knew my hopes of being called had all but faded. And today I received that email, and it was certainly emotional. I heard a story once on NPR about one of the early astronauts saying that they applied something like 11 times before getting the job. So as always, I take this email today as a challenge. How might I better myself to be a better person, a better candidate? All I can do is keep exploring, keep learning, keep striving to chase my curiosities and hope that one day, maybe I'll get that call. So that was my post from 4 years ago. And here I am today at the end of 2021. And sadly, I have a similar email to share with all of you today. I received word from NASA today that again, I was not selected now for the 5th time after having worked for 4 years as a federal employee in a research lab, and now as an honest to goodness assistant professor at a university, teaching the next generation important science. And so I could look at this email and be sad about it, be angry, be upset, maybe despondent, whatever adjective you want to use. Or, like always, I can take it as another challenge, a challenge to better myself as a scientist, to better myself as an educator, and most importantly, just to better myself as a human being. Because no matter what happens with this lifelong odyssey that I'm on, striving to be a better person is always a good thing. So I'm going to keep teaching, I'm going to keep learning, I'm going to keep researching, and most importantly, I'm going to keep exploring. I'm going to keep that fire, that passion alive within me, because as long as that part of me is on fire and is lit up, no matter where my life path takes me, I'm going to be fulfilled, knowing that I'm participating in some way that's keeping that passion alive within me. So congratulations to all of the new 10 candidates that have been selected by NASA. I'm genuinely excited for you guys. I hope that you get a chance to go back to the moon or go to Mars or do some other really cool and exciting science and be a part of some really important missions. And as for me, maybe one day I'll get a chance to join you up there. But even if not, this has been an incredible lifelong journey that I've been on, and it's certainly allowed me to become a much better person and a much better scientist and educator and all those things. So again, thank you. And to all of you watching, take care, be safe. I'll see you in the next video. And just as a fun way to sign off, I'm going to play you guys a video that I recorded back in 2014 when I was applying for that Mars simulation program in the Canadian Arctic. So you can hear just how passionate I was even 7 years ago about the same thing. So take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with a short bio. I'm a grad student, PhD candidate at Penn State University. I work in the geosciences department, but I study ice. So I've spent the last 6 years of my life working on a project that involved drilling an ice core in West Antarctica, and I'm specifically interested in the physical and climatological history of the region. So I've had a lot of fun. I spent 5 summers down in Antarctica, 5 field seasons, loved every minute of it, and finishing up this year. So moving on to the questions that we were asked by the committee, I think in order to answer any of the questions specific to the project, I think you sort of have to start with the overarching question of why Mars. I know when I tell people I apply to this project, they want to know, well, why apply or why even go to Mars at all? And I think you kind of have to answer that question from 2 angles. I think it's also the most difficult question to answer, but I think the first angle is sort of the scientific angle, and that's the scientist in me talking. I think that you go to Mars because there's just so much potential for scientific research. And I'm not just talking from a geoscience perspective. I mean, you send botanists, you send astrobiologists, you send biologists, you send, of course, the geologists and the polar scientists, but there's just so many different areas of science that you can study. And it's feasibly, I mean, it's really the only extraterrestrial body that we can go to anytime in the near future, realistically, other than, maybe the moon again, and actually land human beings on to study. So I think that's the scientist in me says that, but there's also, I think, the human component. If you look at history and you think about just sort of the human nature. There's sort of this explorer in all of us, I think. And I know from my field, if you look back at people like Amundsen and Scott and Shackleton and these guys, I mean, they were explorers by nature. And sure, they wanted to plant their flags for their countries, but I think deep down there's that little bit of explorer in all of us. And so I think it's just the next evolution of that exploration is to go to Mars. And I know it's still probably decades away, but I think that's why you go. I mean, it's a little cliche and Star Trek-y to say that, but I think that's why you go. Now, as far as why I'm interested in going, there's certainly a little bit of a component of it that's a selfish component. I mean, obviously I study ice, so the thought of going to doing the simulation and working in the Arctic region is just it gets me really excited. I've spent a lot of time in the Antarctic, but not in the Arctic. So getting to work up one of the Canadian islands gets me pretty excited, especially the thought of wintering over. And all the time I've spent in Antarctica, I've never been able to winter over. So the thought of being able to winter over is really exciting. But also, I think just knowing that I can play a part. So even if this simulation is step 1 of 1,000, if I can play a small part by doing the simulation and step 1 of 1,000 and know that I did something to maybe help further the possibility, I mean, even that in itself is pretty rewarding, I think. So I think that's the other reason I want to do it, just to hopefully contribute something to the greater goal of sending an actual person to Mars. I think I'm excited, like I said, about the wintering over and actually working in the Arctic. I thrive in that sort of environment. But the one thing I'm a little terrified about is I'm a very avid outdoors person. I love to hike. I've thru-hiked a bunch of trails, Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail. I spend a lot of time outdoors, trail running, and not being able to go outside and enjoy and go for a run around the base or whatever without my suit. I think that has me a little nervous. Even in Antarctica, I found time to go out and ski and run along around the camp and stuff. So that's got me a little nervous. But I think it all comes with the package. You know, if you apply for something like this, you got to take everything, and that's part of the deal. So I think I would cope with it and deal with it. And I think the last thing we were asked is sort of to think of a time when we had to overcome a great obstacle. And certainly we've all had situations with sort of struggle, but as far as a particular anecdote, there's a race that I did once that on paper there's no way I should have been able to finish it. It's a race called the Barkley Marathons, and it's a trail race in the woods of Tennessee, and it's over 100 miles, a lot of climbs and descents and briars and compass navigation, and in the 25-year history of the race, only 10 people had ever finished it. And I signed up for this race, and I don't know if it was just me being stubborn or me trying to just prove to myself that I could do it, but I trained harder than I did for any other event, and I came to that event with no one expecting that I had any shot at all of finishing. And 60 hours later, just a few minutes shy of the cutoff, I managed to finish and prove to myself and everybody else that against all odds, if you want something bad enough and you're willing to work hard enough for it, you can accomplish things. So I think that's my one anecdote. Certainly I have other times in my life when I had to deal with personal struggles, but I thought that was a fun story. So I think that's it. I'm probably way over my time, but yeah, so thanks for watching.